Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about the 2.6 update and some of your polling choices for the next update. If you don't know, next update we're getting 4 characters: Heng, Aventurine, Acheron, and then the upcoming Rappa. Today we're going to be talking about which one you should choose and maybe some better or worse choices for that update. Boys, let's get straight into today's video. And let's start off with probably your number one option of the 2.6 update, Acheron, who is debatably the best DPS in the entire game. She is by far the best Nihility DPS in the game. In terms of is she the best? Well, she rivals units such as Fei Zhao, for example, and Firefly as well. Between those three, those are the 3 best DPSs in the game. You could argue Acheron is the best. If you have the right supports for her, which is pretty easy to do because Pela works really well with her, it makes her even better. If you had a Silver Wolf for even more defense shred, it works even better. I like to use E2 Sparkle because she also has a defense shred, and then you can really just fit any support in the 4th slot to work with her. There are tons of options. Aventurine, who is also coming out this update, works perfectly fine. Fu Xuan does. Lots of good options there, but generally this is what you're looking at for your best Acheron teams. That being said, she doesn't just work with defense shred teams where you're just trying to make Acheron the best DPS. She also works pretty well in any single Nihility team. If you put her on a team with Kafka and Black Swan, she'll also work just great. The reason that she works so well with all the Nihility characters in the game is because she gets stacks of her ultimate based off the debuffs we apply. So if we apply a debuff with Black Swan, we get 1 point, and then we did another one with Kafka, we got 2 points. We get 2 points with our skill. Boom, we're now up to 9 points, and that's why Acheron is so good with Nihility units. So you really want to try to pair her with other Nihility units so you can get off this absolutely crazy busted ultimate that is debatably the best ultimate in the entire game. It's nuts. I'm a big fan of Acheron because she's really free to play friendly. She's one of the only characters who you can pair with other 4-star supports, and she still works really well. Some examples include Pela, who we talked about, Kekvin, who we've also talked about. Even Serval can apply debuffs, and Sampo is another amazing option. There's so many good 4-star characters that she really works with. So in that regard, she's one of the most universal characters in the game. Not only that, but you can use her in almost any of the endgame content. She's great for MOC. She was included in my MOC run. She goes great against Aventurine in particular. Not only that, but she's also great for Pure Fiction and AP Shadow as well. She works in every bit of content. I'm pretty sure I used her for my most recent Pure Fiction as well. Level 4? Oh no, I actually didn't use Acheron, but I think you could have because they do have some DOT buffs sometimes in the Pure Fiction. They don't right now, but when this resets, you could always possibly see a DOT focused Pure Fiction. So it's good to have characters like Acheron in case that ever shows up. And as for the last one, AP Shadow, again, I'd probably debate that she's probably the most universal, useful unit in AP Shadow. I used her on basically all of my runs. As you can see, I used her right here on node 3. They almost always have DOT effects in here, which help Acheron a lot. She also has probably one of my favorite features for an overworld attack in the entire game, being the insta-kill that you can do to any enemy. It just makes things so much faster. Not to mention, it's also just super satisfying to look at, just watching her slash open the common enemies. But to be more particular, for Divergent Universe and Simulated Universe, it just makes your life so much easier. So I would say Acheron would probably be my top polling option out of every single character coming in 2.6. But regardless, let's talk about the next character coming in the second half of 2.6, Aventurine. He is, again, probably debatably the best sustainer in the game. If we look at our options for sustainers, Abundance, I honestly don't think anyone here outclasses him. And then Preservation, you could argue Fu Xuan does. I'd say they're almost equal, to be honest. With Aventurine, you really want to pair them in follow-up teams with characters like Topaz and Numby. Robin, Clara are all good examples. He works really well when paired with Dr. Ratio. He has great Fei Zhao teams. One of his best teams is pairing him with Fei Zhao, Robin, Topaz, and Numby, and then having him in the 4th slot. But honestly, you can throw Aventurine in any single team in the game. He can work universally, again, on almost any team. Need a preservation unit to make sure Kafka stays alive? He's there. Jade? He's there. Fei Zhao? he's there. Aventurine can work with anyone, and that is one of my favorite things about him. Unfortunately, his technique is not as useful as Acheron's. All it really does is raise your defense a little bit, but it's still a nice little buff. But in battle is where he really comes into play. He gives you essentially the infinity shield. It's pretty nutty. In order to lose the shield, you have to like really suck at the game, or the enemy has to be really powerful. He's also skill point efficient because you basically never have to use his E at all. Again, unless you either suck at the game or the enemy is just really strong. His fortified wager shield is just so easy to get up without using his skill. His skill does increase it, but by using his ultimate and triggering his talent, it's just way easier and way more skill point efficient, which is good with teams like I'm using now that aren't very skill point efficient, because every time we get his talent, we raise a bit of our shield, and that of course helps him greatly and keeps our units alive. It's the same thing with the ultimate, which gives us a random amount of points towards our talents, which then goes toward our shield. As we see, the follow-up attack, we get more shield. It just happens every time. And that's what makes Aventurine so great. Not to mention, he's probably the most attractive male in the game. And his eyes scream villain, but we can ignore that for now. I'd like to mention he's also super easy to build. He's one of the easiest characters to build. You can basically use any single light cone you want on him. Like, genuinely, any of these 5-star, 4-star light cones can work. Traces are pretty simple as well. You just don't have to level the normal attack. Everything else you take to 888. Relics, all you really need is just stacking defense on every single piece. And like I said, you're good to go. It's just about stacking defense, and if you have some extra stats to throw along, you can get some crit rate and damage to make him do a tiny bit more damage with his follow-up. And that, my friends, is the second unit of the 2.6 update. Let's move on to the next one. Now, before we go into the next unit, I do just want to give a little disclaimer that this game is pretty easy, and unless you're determined to be all content, you can genuinely pull any character in the game, and you can just go based on how they look, their appearances. I'm only saying this because this next character, well, I'm gonna lean towards the negative side, which I know a lot of people don't like. But anyways, disclaimers aside, let's talk about Imbibitor Lunae. Imbibitor Lunae, well, he's here. He is a character in the game. How he works? Well, the big downside to Imbibitor Lunae is the skill points that he takes in order to get off a lot of his abilities, and mainly the strong ones. If you want to get the max use of his skill, you have to use a total of 3 skill points, or if you saved up some of the dragon scales right below his little face in the bottom left-hand corner, then that takes away or subtracts the skill points that you have to use. But generally, he's still a very skill point heavy character. And honestly, his damage isn't all that great for being so skill point heavy. And without other supports, he just does not work as well. As you can see, subtracting 3 skill points in a singular turn, which is extremely expensive to keep up with. Heng was a character that was amazing when he first came out, debatably the best DPS at the time of his release, but nowadays he's been outclassed by units such as Acheron. It's not that he's necessarily a bad unit, there are just better units out there. His enhance ability puts you into a dragon state, which what it does is give you one of the stacks that you use to subtract skill points in battle. It essentially gives you one of those as soon as you enter. It's honestly not the coolest thing ever, but hey, it's a little helpful at the start of battle. Heng also requires a little more investment than other characters. He has a select few really good light cones, which I have a build guide going over, but he doesn't work with every light cone in the game. Traces, you do generally want to get up every single last trace with him as well, so he requires a lot more investment in the trace department. And for relics, you really want to have good crit stats, good speed stats. That's going to be super important. So if you're not hitting things like 134 speed and then generally a good crit rate to damage ratio, he's just not as good. And the other problem is, if you don't have the right supports to pair with him, he just does not work as well at all. His best support in the game is Sparkle, by far. Without Sparkle, Heng feels like a nightmare to use. Sparkle is the only way I can still play this unit, me personally. Sparkle is by far the most skill point friendly unit in the entire game, bringing your max skill points to 7, but also having the ability to recover skill points as well, which makes Heng and Imbibitor Lunae a lot better. So if you do have Sparkle, this makes Don Heng a lot more worthwhile than he would be previously. Other than Sparkle, he does have other good units he can work with. Another pretty decent support is Ting Yun, since she is pretty skill point friendly as well. He doesn't really work with units like Bronya because she takes a crap ton of skill points. Obviously doesn't work with Ron May at all, and even Asta kind of requires a few skill points. So generally your secondary support is either going to be Ting Yun or Sparkle, one of the two. Then you just want any sustainer that, again, preferably doesn't take many skill points. Like, for example, a Fu Xuan doesn't take too many, and neither does an Aventurine. And after getting all those 5-star units and building him with the best crit, best speed, finally, you can have a somewhat decent Don Heng that genuinely probably couldn't even beat MOC 12, if we're being honest. I mean, not to give him too much slack. Maybe he could do it. Come on, buddy, you got this. Let's do damage to the enemy. How much damage we doing? We did 93k. That sounds like good, but Acheron probably could have done like 500k for being real. Like, look how much damage that took off the enemy with a single skill. And my Don Heng's pretty decent. He's definitely not the best Don Heng ever. He gets a lot better when you have things like his light cone, for example. But I have a pretty decent, like, free-to-play friendly Don Heng build. But as you can see, we're past like turn 29 and we still haven't killed the first wave of enemies. Sparkle got the quantum effect. I mean, everything's not going good in La La Land over here. Averaging 90 to 100k damage free to play isn't bad. It's just comparatively to like a lot of the other units, he just doesn't fit in the same skill tower. Could I beat this with Don Heng? Probably yes. I could beat it with him. It would just not be the most optimal 3-star clear and would probably take me a little bit longer. If we look at a pretty reliable tier list, being the Pridden tier list, you can see in things like Memory, Chaos, Pure Fiction, and AP Shadow, he generally sits somewhere around the tier 1 to tier 2 areas, but he's never going to be in the apex characters, being the best characters in the whole game. Pure Fiction, he doesn't even make past tier 4. So like I said, he's not a bad character. He's just not the best character, and there are other alternatives. But regardless, let's talk about today's final character, being Rappa, who is the last character of the video and the hardest one to judge because we don't have too much information on her as of yet. The only thing we have to go off is the live stream trailer, which from what I saw here, she looks pretty fun. She has a cool surfboard technique, which allows you to traverse the world with absolute ease. It looks like so much fun, just running up to units and hitting them with that. She is, of course, an erudition character as well, so all her attacks are going to be AoE, which is definitely going to make her an amazing character for Pure Fiction specifically. She will be a great unit for this. She is going to be a break unit, and you can see her best team down there being Trailblazer, Ron May, and Ling Shaw. If you haven't already, I highly recommend building Trailblazer to work with her if you do plan to pull her, because her, with the combination of the classic Firefly team, not including Firefly, is going to be a really good team. You can obviously switch out Ling Shaw for Gallagher if you just don't happen to have her. I would say Harmony Trailblazer is definitely a staple in this team. You probably need him. Ron May is pretty important too, but if you don't have a Ron May, you could look at some other alternatives depending on the content you're doing. For example, if you're doing Pure Fiction, you could have a secondary DPS like a Herda or a Kafka, Jade, for example. Lots of good options there. But generally, I would have Harmony Trailblazer, Ling Shaw or Gallagher, and then our girl Rappa in the team. Now, the way she works, it's pretty simple. She's just erudition break. Her goal is just to break everything. And when she does break, she does the max amount of damage possible. Her ultimate's pretty cool. It puts her into like this ninjutsu state where she's going to attack 3 enemies in a line. So it's going to be like a blast attack. It's going to go into 2 3s and then a 5. So the third one is going to be a 5-hit attack on all 5 of the enemies on the field if there is 5, which again, she's going to be a Pure Fiction unit. So there will almost always be 5 enemies in the battle when she's in that state. As for if she can compete with other DPSs, it has yet to be seen. I'll tell you right now, we don't have many good erudition DPSs. I think the best one debatably is probably Jade is the current best one. So I think she probably will most likely be the best erudition DPS we have seen yet. And I think I can say that with pretty much certainty. And of course, she's going to fit into the break meta right now. Although I don't see her being better than Firefly from my guess. There was just so much hype around this character. I can't see Rappa being better than Firefly, but I definitely can see her being better than Imbibitor Lunae, who is on the same banner as her at the same time. So if you're choosing between Imbibitor Lunae and Rappa, well, I'd probably go for Rappa, to be completely honest. I mean, she's just cooler. Let's just say it how it is. She's a ninja. That's freaking awesome. She has a cool light cone coming out as well. The 4 stars are good in this banner. I'm honestly a big fan of her personally, and I can't find many reasons not to pull her. So me personally, I'm going all out. But let me know what you plan to do down in the comments below. But regardless, boys, that's going to be all for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm going to see you all in the next one. Peace.